Thank you very much for joining us today for this presentation. I am so delighted to be here and to have been invited by Sarah on behalf of Unique. Indeed, we've been working with Unique for so long, and it's been such a fantastic collaboration. So today I am going to present findings from the last 15 or so years of study that we have been conducting at Cardiff University to better understand the lives and experiences of children and young people with rare genetic variants. And our study has four main overarching aims. One is to study and increase the understanding of the development of children and young people with rare genetic conditions that are caused by chromosomal deletions or duplications. But also, very importantly, to work together with families and charities to give answers to the questions that matter most to them. We aim to ensure that our findings benefit individuals and families. And so wherever we can, we try to share the information that we have gained over time through meetings and also through the development and the contribution to resources. And we also engage with local and with central government to increase awareness and to ensure that the needs of individuals and families that are affected by rare genetic conditions are known so that they can be taken into account in decision-making processes. And we also think that it is vital that we contribute to increased public awareness of these rare conditions and the needs of individuals and families. And so where we can, we regularly take part in podcasts, interviews with the media, and also community events. We are a team led by Cardiff University of a range of researchers with various backgrounds to make sure that together we combine the expertise that is needed to really understand the daily experiences of these children and their families. And although we are located here in Cardiff, we do work together with research institutions all over the UK as well as internationally to make sure that our understanding of these rare conditions advances optimally and at pace. Our research focus is on rare genetic conditions that are caused by copy number variation. And this refers to deletions and duplications on a chromosome. And to explain this briefly in a little bit more detail, we have pairs of chromosomes in the cells of our body. And if an individual has a deletion, that means that they have one intact chromosome, but on the other copy of this chromosome, a region is deleted. This is the yellow region that is not present on the deleted chromosome. And individuals with a duplication also have one intact chromosome, but on the other copy, they have two copies of this specific region. So if we compare individuals with a deletion or a duplication with typical individuals have two intact chromosomes with this region being present twice. Individuals with a deletion have this region present once, and individuals with a duplication have 3 copies of this region. And this matters because regions such as this on chromosomes contain genes, and copy number variation means that there are different numbers of copies of those genes. And those genes impact on all our daily functioning and behavior. At Cardiff and with the teams we collaborate with, we study a range of different copy number variants, both deletions as well as duplications. And this is important because it allows us to better understand how similar or different children and young people with a specific copy number variant are, but also how similar or different children are who have different copy number variants. And all the copy number variants that we study impact on neurodevelopment. This means that they impact on the growth and the development of the nervous system and the brain. And therefore, the young people that take part in our studies are more likely to have neurodevelopmental conditions such as learning impairment, motor difficulties, autism, or ADHD. To focus a little bit more on our study approach, we aim to capture the wide range of experiences of children and young people and their families, not just by looking at medical records, but crucially through their own words. And we recruit families into our studies in different ways, including through genetics clinics, as well as charities, social media, and also word of mouth. And over 3,000 families have already taken part in our studies, and families live all over Great Britain as well as Ireland. So our team regularly hops in the car, on the train, or sometimes also in the airplane. And families often ask us, what can we expect for our child in the future? And so we also follow the children over time into adolescence and into adulthood as well. This is called longitudinal development. And over 350 families have already taken part 2 or more times. And some families have now taken part 5 times. And this is crucial for us to understand development. What does taking part look like? Well, either our team comes to visit the family in the comfort of their own home, or if families prefer, they can come to Cardiff to take part. And in this case, we reimburse the family for all expenses. We have an interview with the parent or carers about the child, as well as with the child themselves. And we do puzzles with the child to better understand their learning and their thinking or their cognition, and games to better understand how they move, their motor coordination. And the parent also completes a questionnaire. And where possible, we also ask a sibling in the family closest in age to the child, but without a copy number variant, to also take part. And those siblings are really important to our studies because it means that we can compare children with a copy number variant with children without such a copy variant. And this can give us a much better understanding about the extent to which children with a copy number variant develop differently from children with more typical development. And once the family has taken part, we produce a short report with our findings, which we share with the family. And if they so please us to do, then we can also share it with the general practitioner. And families find these reports useful for sharing around and have told us that it has helped them getting additional support for the child, either in school and or in the clinical setting. And we also stay in touch with our families through our newsletters. This is the one for the summer of this year, and we are currently working on one that we will send to families in January. So my talk today will focus on 4 areas of research that we have been conducting over the last number of years. One of those areas is what is the impact of having a copy number variant on the development and the behavior of children and young people? And I will focus on our findings on cognition, mental health, motor coordination, sleep, and eating and feeding. Then I will spend a bit of time to explain more about what we have learned about children's development over time. And then I will focus on the work we have done to better understand how similar or different children are with different copy number variants. And finally, I will share some of our findings of what we have learned about the experiences of parents and carers, with a focus on mothers' well-being, genetic counseling experiences of families, and also the experiences of parents and carers in getting the support for their child that they need. So first, then, as I said, I will focus on some of our findings on development and behavior. And I will start with cognition and with a specific focus on IQ. And this graph depicts children with a copy number variant, their mean IQ, and children with a copy number variant are in blue and siblings are in green. And I will use those same colors throughout this presentation. So as you can see, children with a copy number variant on average tend to have lower IQ than their siblings. And when we look at this in a bit more detail with a focus on learning impairment, which refers to an IQ of less than 70, then we see that children with a copy number variant, about 20% of them have evidence of learning impairment. Looking in a bit more detail at the overall distribution of IQ in the children with a CNV in our studies, as I mentioned, about 20% have learning impairment, and this means they have significant problems with learning, problem solving, judgment, and daily living. Another about 50% of children have some minor issues in this area. And about 30% of children with a CNV do not have any evidence of learning difficulties. So I think the important message here is that copy number variation can impact young people quite differently. And some people can have considerable learning difficulties, and other young people don't have any evidence of learning difficulties. Our studies of mental health, I will focus on this now a bit more. This slide presents the rates of having any mental health diagnosis, one or more. And again, in blue, the children with a CNV, and in green, their siblings. And in our studies, about 80% of children with a copy number variant have one or more mental health diagnoses. And this is considerably higher than for the siblings, where it is 20%. I will focus now in the next few slides on some of the most common mental health experiences in children with copy number variation. One of those is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. And this is measured in two different domains. One is hyperactivity, impulsivity. So this refers to children being very restless. They find it difficult to remain seated. They constantly interrupt other people. They find it very difficult to take turns. The other subdomain is inattention, and this refers to children making careless mistakes a lot, finding it difficult to follow instructions, being easily distracted, forgetful, and so on. ADHD is common in children with a copy number variant. In our studies, it is present in about half of children with a CNV, compared to about 10% of the siblings. And we were interested to better understand if ADHD in children with a copy number variant is the same as in children without a copy number variant, or whether there are differences. And so we conducted a study, and this was focusing on children with a specific copy number variant, namely 22q deletion. And we compared children with 22q deletion with ADHD with children with ADHD that were recruited through an ADHD clinic and who didn't have a copy number variant. And we found that both groups were very similar with regards to their experiences of inattention. But for impulsivity and hyperactivity, children with 22q deletion were less impacted by this than children with ADHD without a copy number variant. So this means that ADHD looks a bit different in children with a copy number variant. At least this is the case for 22q deletion. And this can mean that a child with 22q deletion who does have ADHD may be less likely to be referred for screening and may be less likely to be diagnosed with ADHD and receive the support that they need. We have also studied autism, and this is also common in children with a copy number variant, and it tends to be assessed also in two different domains. One is communication and social interaction, So this refers to the ability to be able to initiate interactions with others, to respond to others, and to be able to understand and to relate to others. And the other domain is restricted and repetitive behaviors and interests, such as repetitive rocking of the body, insistence on the sameness of daily routines, or an intense focus on a specific activity or an object. Autistic traits are very common in children with a copy number variant. They are present in about 65% of children, and that is much elevated compared to the siblings, where it's present in about 5%. And we were interested to better understand this distribution of autistic traits in children with copy number variation. And so we did an international study to better understand this, and this study focused specifically on children with 22q deletion. We found that about 30% of children with 22q deletion have autistic traits that meet the criteria for an autism diagnosis. But this doesn't mean that the other 70% of children with 22q deletion don't have evidence for autistic traits. The majority, about 50%, still have autistic traits that still impact on their daily life, but they are not quite at a level where they meet an autism diagnosis. And then about 15% of children with 22q deletion don't have any evidence of autistic traits. So like for IQ here, we see very variable presentation of autistic traits. Some children have a diagnosis, some children have no traits at all. And this goes for children who all have the same CNV, 22q deletion. We have shared these findings in a recent government report to increase awareness of the relationship between autistic traits and copy number variation. We have also studied anxiety disorder in our cohort. And this is referring to behaviors such as excessive worry that a child finds very difficult to control, being on edge and restless, impaired concentration, the mind goes blank, muscle tension. And this is present in about 20% of children with a copy number variant. And it's about twice as high as it is in the siblings. I did mention already that we have also focused on movement, on motor coordination. This is sometimes referred to as development coordination disorder, sometimes also referred to as dyspraxia. And it is referring to difficulties with the coordination of movements. And it tends to be measured across 3 different motor domains, including fine motor skills such as cutting and writing, gross motor skills such as jumping and catching, and also balance. And children who have more difficulties, who show greater clumsiness in these areas, are more likely to have development coordination disorder. And this is particularly common in children with a copy number variant. It is present in about 90% of children in our studies, compared to about 20% in the siblings. This link with motor coordination is not always appreciated, and we have therefore shared these findings too in a recent government report to increase awareness. We have also focused on sleep difficulties. This was one of the areas of focus of our research, and that was determined by parents. Parents came up to us at conferences and they asked us, can you please study sleep? Because my child has such difficulties with this and it disrupts family life. It's quite a burden on the family. And so we looked into this, and we found that this is indeed common in children with a copy number variant. It's present in about 65% of children, but it's not uncommon in the siblings either. It's present in 40% of the siblings. And it starts early in children with a copy number variant, with an onset of approximately around 2.5 years of age. And we were interested to better understand the nature of these sleep difficulties. And so we did a more detailed study in children with 22q deletion. And we found that if children with 22q deletion have sleep difficulties, they fall in 2 different domains. About 20% have insomnia. This refers to trouble falling or staying asleep, or to wake up too early in the morning. And about 45% have restless sleep. This means that they sleep, but they don't really rest as well as they could. And this means that they are quite tired and they can feel quite worn out during the day. And they may experience daytime sleepiness. And about 1/3 of the children with sleep difficulties had difficulties in both those areas. A new area of study for us is eating and feeding. And this is work that is led by Dr. Samuel Cholner in my research team. This slide is focusing on 3 different areas that we have looked into recently. Much more work will be coming in this area through SAM. One area we've looked at is hyperphagia, and this refers to children always being hungry. It doesn't matter how much they eat, they can't seem to get satisfied. This is present in about 10% of children with copy number variants. And one of the parents told us, "My child has a voracious, insatiable appetite. My child will eat anything and everything, including a whole jar of pickles non-stop." Extreme food fussiness is also common. It's present in about 35% of children. And this refers to when a child is tremendously reluctant to eat anything but a very limited range of foods, and it cannot be persuaded to try anything new. It's a real struggle to let them try something new. One parent told us, "My child won't eat anything except chicken nuggets or dinosaurs, but has just started eating tinned carrots." And another area of eating and feeding that can be experienced by children with a copy number variant is pica. And this refers to the eating of non-food items, such as paper or dirt. And this was really driven home to us quite a few years ago when, for our study, we still sent paper copies to families and asked them to complete these for their child. We now are using an online questionnaire, but back then, one of the parents contacted us and they said, "Can you please post a new questionnaire, because my child did eat the one that you sent previously." So that is evidence of pica. So I have now presented evidence that children with copy number variation are more likely to have experiences in a range of different areas shown here. And we were interested to know the extent to which they may be more likely to experience issues in multiple of those domains compared to the siblings. And in dark blue on these 2 bars, you see the number of children, percentage of children who don't have any issues. And you can see that the siblings are much more likely to not have any issues in any of those domains, or maybe to have one issue. Whereas for children with a copy number variant in gray, yellow, orange, purple, they are more likely to have 2, 3, 4 or more issues. So in other words, their presentation can be quite complicated. And as you may have gathered from what I have presented so far, children with the same CNV can be quite different. For example, one child with a specific CNV may be experiencing almost none or no issues at all. Another child with exactly the same CNV may have some issues in some domains, and in some domains a bit more than in other domains. And yet another child with yet again the same CNV may be experiencing issues in many or all domains and quite seriously. So for this section, I will now give a short summary of the findings. We have compared children and young people with a copy number variant with typically developing children, their siblings. Overall, we are finding that children with a CNV are more likely than their siblings to experience difficulties with learning and thinking that do impact their daily lives. And they are also more likely to have evidence of hyperactivity and inattentiveness, ADHD, to behave more differently in social situations, autism, to be more anxious, anxiety disorder, to be less agile, development coordination or motor coordination, and to be more likely to have issues with sleeping and eating or feeding. Also, children with a CNV are more likely to show combinations of these behaviors rather than a single behavior. So their presentation is complex. And we have seen that mental health conditions may look different in children. For example, we found this for children with ADHD, children with 22q deletion who had ADHD. And our findings indicate each child with a CNV is different. And this makes it really difficult to predict how the presence of a CNV will impact a child. And this complicates issues around planning and the provision of the best care and support of the child. I now will focus on the second area. What have we learned about children's development over time? As I mentioned, we do longitudinal follow-up of children, and 350 families have already taken part 2 times or more, so that we can really begin to get an understanding of development over time. And focusing first on cognition, there are 2 different scenarios that we wanted to explore further. One of those is that both children with a copy number variant, as well as their siblings, as they go through childhood and then through adolescence, they continue to learn and to develop new skills. Just children with a CNV do so at a slower pace than their siblings. It is also possible that whereas the siblings continue to learn and develop new skills, that children with a copy number variant may lose some of the skills they previously learned. So we wanted to understand this situation better, and so we looked in our data for IQ, both verbal IQ, which is solving problems verbally, and performance IQ, which focuses on complex, abstract reasoning, spatial skills. And this is data that has been collected from young people between the ages of 6 to 20 years who have taken part multiple times in our studies. And as you can see, scenario 1 is much more plausible with this data. Children with a CNV continue to learn and develop new skills, but just at a somewhat slower pace than their siblings. We have also now been able to look at mental health over time because families have taken part 3 times or more. This data presents mental health information from families that have taken part 3 times. Once when the child was 10 years old, once when they were 13 and a half, and then when they were 15 and a half. The blue bars are again children with a CNV, and the green bars are siblings. And this slide is presenting information on the presence of 1 or more mental health conditions. And you can see that children with a copy number variant over time to continue to be at considerably higher risk of having mental health experiences compared to their siblings. But there's also some evidence that some symptoms may decline a little when they go from childhood into adolescence. And in this slide, I have presented these same findings for different experiences that we have focused on in our research. And particularly if you look at ADHD, you can see that children with a copy number variant, by the time they reach adolescence, so at time point 2 and 3, the rate of an ADHD diagnosis goes down considerably. It roughly halves compared to childhood. So a short summary of the children's development over time. Children with a CNV continue to learn and develop new learning and thinking skills, but they do so in general at a slower pace than their siblings. They continue to be more likely to have experiences of mental health compared to their siblings as they progress from childhood through adolescence. But some behaviors do decrease to a certain extent. For example, hyperactivity, impulsivity, and inattentive behaviors, ADHD. I will now present a couple of slides based on our findings of comparing individuals, children and young adults, children and young people with different copy number variants to better understand to what extent they are similar or different. And just as a reminder, we are focusing in Cardiff on quite a range of different copy number variants, and this enables us to do this. This slide is presenting the findings for IQ. In blue is full-scale IQ, orange is verbal IQ, and gray is performance IQ. And full-scale IQ is just a combination of verbal and performance IQ together. And to the left-hand side are the mean IQ findings for a range of different copy number variants. And you can see that there is considerable variation. Some of these copy number variants are associated with a higher or a lower IQ than others. But if we compare all the CNVs with the siblings who are in the green circle all the way to the right, all those copy number variants show evidence of lower IQ and some learning issues compared to the siblings. And similarly, when we look at mental health, and these bars present the rates in different CNV groups of different mental health conditions, such as mood, anxiety, and ADHD. Again, there is considerable variability across CNVs, but in all CNVs, children are more likely to have mental health experiences in comparison to the siblings. Similarly, they are more likely to experience issues with motor coordination and with sleep and with eating and feeding. So with regards to these findings, a short summary. There are differences in the developmental and behavioral outcomes between different copy number variants. Children with certain copy number variants are more likely or less likely to experience learning and thinking issues or mental health experiences. But in comparison to the siblings, as a group, all children with these CNVs have experiences in common. They are all more likely to be affected in those areas than the siblings are. That is, overall, our work is indicating children with these different CNVs are more similar than they are different. And this is important for a point I want to make later. Finally, I will focus on what we have learned about the experiences of parents and carers. This was driven by a study that we did a while ago, in which we compared the mothers in our studies. So they are all mothers with one or more children with a CNV. We compared them with mothers in another study that we did not conduct, who were the same age, but they did not have a child with a CNV. And when we compared experiences of depression and anxiety, we were unfortunately finding that mothers with a child with a CNV are more likely to have experienced issues in those areas. And although we found this disheartening, we were not very surprised, because over the years in our interactions with the parents, we have learned that it is not always easy to be able to provide and to obtain the support for the child that they need. And this can be stressful. And we wanted to better understand this. So we did a study, and we thought we would start at the very early start of the journey of the parent with the child, namely when the experiences of parents with getting the child's genetic diagnosis. And here we asked parents how satisfied they had been about how they received their child's genetic diagnosis. And we found that, fortunately, 70% of parents were happy with this process, but this also means that 30% were not happy with how this had happened. And when we asked parents what contributed to them being satisfied with this process, they said that they were more likely to be satisfied if the communication had been through a clinical expert, face-to-face, if their child's condition was clearly explained, and if the communication also included an offer of additional support for the family. Staying with the early days of becoming a parent of a child with a genetic condition, and I know not all children are diagnosed early, but many are. We did a study focusing on parents with a child with 22q deletion. And we know that this deletion can impact certain aspects of physical health, development, and mental health. And we asked parents to what extent they were aware that this deletion can have an implication on physical health. And this is the blue part of these bars here. So you can see that almost all parents were aware of physical health issues and also developmental issues that can be associated with 22q deletion. But when we asked them about mental health, they were less likely to be aware that children with 22q deletion can also have mental health issues. And then we asked in this same study the parents how they first learned about those possible manifestations of 22q deletion. And when we asked about physical and developmental issues, the great majority, well, not a great majority, but the majority of parents did say that they learned about these through a clinician, either at diagnosis or later in a subsequent clinical consultation. But when we asked parents how they first learned about mental health conditions, the picture was different, and the majority of parents first found out about mental health associations for 22q deletion through the internet. And clearly that's not a desirable situation, because mental health issues are very complicated, and it would be much preferable if families learned about those supported by a clinical expert. In our communications with families and charities, we have also become increasingly aware of the importance of the school environment. We have had workshops with parents and with charities, and on this slide is an infographic that was produced by a local artist who was present during one of those workshops. And two things come up time and again. One is mental health support, and the other one is the school environment. And this was further driven home by me when I was at the 22q conference in Ireland, and I had a chat with Anya Lawler, who is a young woman with 22q deletion. She's depicted here with her mother, Anne, who leads the 22q Ireland charity, and many of you may know Anne and Anya. And Anya told me that she did not have an easy time in school. She was bullied quite severely, and she explained to me how that had impacted her mental well-being. So we thought it was important to further study this, and we asked parents to what extent their children had experienced bullying in school, and found that, unfortunately, over half of children with a CNV have such experiences. I know that bullying is not uncommon in general, and in our study, about over 25% of the siblings had also had experiences of bullying. We found that children with a copy number variant who had such experiences were more likely to do so if they also had ADHD or autistic traits. So clearly there is still room for schools for improvement, for children to not have to have these experiences, and this can have a positive impact on their mental well-being. Continuing with the educational system, we did ask parents to what extent they were satisfied with the educational support their child was receiving. And again, it was reassuring that about 3/4 of parents did report that they were satisfied with this support. But it does again mean that 25% of parents were not satisfied. And when we asked parents what helped with satisfaction, children who have an educational healthcare plan in place were more likely, the parents were more likely to be satisfied with the support they were receiving in school. Parents whose children had behavioral difficulties were less likely to be happy with the support in school. So this indicates that if a child with a CNV has behavioral difficulties, it is more difficult apparently for the school to provide the support they need. An EHCP is really important. One parent said, fundamentally, no school is able to really provide the right support without an EHCP. And we asked parents if they had such a plan for their children. And about 65% of families said that they did have this for their child with a CNV, which was a lot higher than for the siblings, where it was about 5%. We don't know why the other 35% of children with a CNV don't have such a plan in place, but we do need to keep in mind that not every child with a CNV does need extra support. We do know that it can be really hard to get a plan in place. Some parents that we have spoken with have had really good experiences. One quote from a parent is, "We went straight to the school and said, right, this is the diagnosis. What do we do now?" And then she, the Senko, got straight onto it, applying for an EHCP. So that was a very good experience, but other parents told us different stories. One parent said, "In preparation for the transition to secondary school, my child was awarded 20 hours support through an EHCP. This support was never provided." And families have also told us that they understand there is a strain on funding and a strain on the system. One parent said, "Until now, school hasn't been sure of my child's needs due to no assessments." One parent said, "Schools also have their funding cut. They are doing their best with what they have, but my child needs more." And another parent said, "They are completely overworked. My last caseworker, who was brilliant, she said that she had something like 150 live cases." And sometimes you talk about lack of understanding. One parent told us, "The pediatrician put in the statement that my child needs assessing for ADHD. I mentioned this to the class teacher and the teaching assistant, and they said, oh well, they are not ADHD. I know what ADHD is. They definitely not got ADHD." Within 2 weeks of being in a special school, seeing the pediatrician, my child was medicated for ADHD. So this lack of understanding needs to be addressed as well, particularly given also my earlier presented finding that ADHD can look differently in children with a copy number variant. And we have done research in which we have looked at the extent to which families with a child with a rare genetic condition have an EHCP in place depending on where they live. And we found that families in London are much more likely to have been successful getting such a plan than families in some other parts of the country, like the East Midlands or Yorkshire and the Humber. So clearly this is not a fair situation, and we have contributed these findings to a government report about the SEND crisis in the UK, and to make clear that these inequalities also pertain to families with children with rare genetic conditions. So a short summary of these findings. Some parents and carers have reported excellent support in the clinical setting as well as from the child's school. But other families have really struggled to get the support their child needs to develop optimally. And this can also have an impact on the well-being of the parent or the carer. And it is really crucial that parents, if they do need it, also receive support. And I will conclude with some final thoughts. So time and again, you tell us that there is a lack of awareness of your child's genetic condition and a lack of understanding of how your child's condition impacts their daily functioning and their behavior. And this can be the case all around you, schools, clubs, but also clinicians are sometimes not aware of these rare conditions. And it is not always known or understood that children with these conditions have an increased risk of developmental and mental health issues, and that they can benefit just as well from interventions as other children without rare conditions do, who are having developmental or mental health issues. And it is true, it can be confusing. There are many rare genetic conditions, and their names are also complicated. Families have told us time and again, they can get confused about the name of the condition of their child. 16p11.2 duplication, neurexin deletion, they are not very informative terms. And we call these rare genetic conditions, but they are not that rare. We have conducted studies based on population-based studies of children in the UK, and we've looked at DNA of these children, and we are finding that these copy number variants are actually present in about 2% of children in the UK. And my findings that I've shared with you today also indicate that children and young people with different copy number variants have quite a lot in common in terms of developmental and mental health and other issues. And thus recently I've been thinking, might it be useful to have an overarching term for all these different copy number variants that can then help reduce this confusion, avoid these difficult terms associated with each of those individual conditions, and increase the awareness and understanding of the increased likelihood of those developmental and mental health issues. Could that hopefully improve opportunities for early screening and provision of appropriate support where needed? So thinking around this, I came up with a term. You may not like it. I'm just trying to get the ball rolling here, and it will be interesting to know what you think. But could your children maybe all be musketeers? So one for all and all for one. What do I mean? I mean that rather than you going to the school or the pediatrician or the GP and saying, my child has Kleefstra syndrome, or my child has a 1q1 deletion, and people looking at you blankly, you could say, my child is a musketeer. And there are many children who are musketeers, and they tend to have developmental and mental health issues. And so It may be that my child needs extra support. It's just a thought. Have a think about it and let me know. Final concluding thoughts. You are not on your own. Many families have similar experiences, not only if their child has the same CNV, but also if they have another CNV. And fortunately, there are fantastic support charities available for your child and your family. And it's really important also that parents, carers, don't forget to also look after themselves. So finally, I would like to briefly mention 2 new studies that we are currently conducting. One of these is called Converge, and this study is aiming to better understand the extent to which children with different copy number variants process information. And this study would ask families to come to Cardiff and the children to take part in neuroimaging. They would do games and puzzles in the scanner. And this study is open for children and young people with deletion of 1q to 1.1 or 22q11.2 or duplication of 16p11.2. Again, quite a mouthful. If families are interested to take part or want to find out more, this is the email for this study. And finally, a new study, which we will start next year, is Sleep Detectives. And this tries to better understand why children with a copy number variant are more likely to have sleep difficulties than other children. This study is also focusing on children and young people with deletion of 1q to 1.1 or 22q11.2 or duplication of 16p11.2. And we have developed this study protocol in very close collaboration with a range of different families, as well as charities, including Sarah. And Madison was one of the young people who has helped us, advised us on the development of this study. And she has told us that she's very keen to take part, and she can't wait to take part and become a sleep detective. And for further information, here is the email address about this study. So finally, in conclusion, a big, big thank you for all the families for so generously sharing the experiences of your child and family with us over the years. We would not have been able to do this research without you at all, without your dedication and support. And we have learned all your children are truly unique. And I also would like to thank all the clinicians who have supported our research over the years, as well as our funders. And my final slide is websites and other information resources about resources that we have developed or contributed to over the years. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Marianne. That was amazing. I think lots of people will have found lots of things within that resonate with their own experiences. And we know at Unique that there are lots of very common issues with our families involving sleep and behavior and all of those sorts of things. Now, we've got lots of questions in the chat, Marianne, that I'm going to whiz over to you. One of the first ones was, are the findings also relevant to children with single gene disorders as well as CNVs?
This is a really good question. There isn't enough research into this yet, but we are currently publishing an article in which we only focus on autism, but we have compared children with 30 different types of variants, and about half were copy number variants and about half were single gene variants. And we found that all these young people, again, were quite similar in their distribution of symptoms and diagnosis of autism.
Yeah, and there's some other questions about, does your study include, one of them is supernumerary 8. So, you know, the downsides of all studies are that the eligibility is that you can't look at absolutely everything. One of the other questions was about reflux. So you talked about eating, but you didn't mention reflux. Have you looked at reflux at all?
This could be something we can look at. I am not aware of any findings on that at the moment in Cardiff. It could be that Sam has been collecting information on this, but he hasn't shared the findings with me yet, so we'd have to ask him individually. He's the expert on this topic.
Yeah, so we're hoping for those of you that are interested in the food and eating side of things that we'll get Sam to come in and give a talk about his findings. So he's been doing lots of great work in that area. We have another question. Should all children with 22q deletion syndrome and other CNVs get an IQ test? How important is it, an IQ test?
That's a good question. It would be helpful to do to indicate learning difficulties, and it could then help with getting additional support in schools or in other settings. But I guess if children are doing well in school, then the likelihood that they have learning impairments is reduced, and it may be less helpful in that situation.
And I don't know whether you know this off the top of your head, Mariana, but somebody said hyperphagia. Is it common with 15q11.2 deletions?
Okay, we have that data. I haven't looked at it for individual copy number variants, but we have it. And again, Sam would be the person to ask.
Yeah, we can come back to you on that one. Somebody talked about the sleep, and I don't know whether you've come across this, but this parent said they've got a Your Zone bed from HKD Solutions. They're in Scotland, and it's changed their lives, and they can now get some sleep. And we all know that sleep is just so important, isn't it?
Yes, another area that could be helpful is to focus on sleep hygiene. So to make sure that children are not on the computer or watch television right before going to bed, make sure that the room isn't brightly lit. So there are areas which families can look into that can help as well. But if families have had very good experiences with certain solutions, then it would be really important they share them with other families.
Yeah, and actually, if you share those things with us at Unique, we have several little booklets on different topics, and we can make sure that we include those in there. There's a few comments about how difficult it is to get EHCPs. And again, if you share those experiences with us at Unique, it's really helpful for us to know where the barriers are so that we can help support you. And one thing that we can do at Unique, if it's helpful, is we can help write letters of support for getting that EHCP. So you can just get in touch with us Unique, and we can do that. Another question is there anywhere we can access the evidence on the importance of school setting for CNVs, children with CNVs, as this family are battling to get an EHCP, and no one seems to really get how complex the needs are? And somebody else has said they're interested in that. And I think that's the bit that at Unique we know is also an issue, is that it's just really hard with these rare conditions to help the schools understand why your child needs an EHCP. Do you have any good resources or places to go, Mariana, for that?
The Unique website with the downloadable brochures for specific conditions, I think, can really help to help inform the schools. And I think, Sarah, you are also involved with or are developing initiatives to educate schools about these conditions. But
yes.
I do wonder whether an overarching term, everyone knows what Down syndrome is. Hardly anyone knows what, 1q2 1.1 deletion or duplication is. And if we have an overarching term, maybe that can help. I'll leave that to the audience to think about further, but it could increase awareness, I hope.
Yeah, I completely agree. So we'll also, when we send a follow-up email to you, we'll ask you to feedback your thoughts about an overarching term and the one that Marianne has proposed, musketeers. But I think it's a big part of what we do at Unique is trying to raise awareness of all of these conditions, and collectively they're actually not that rare. And Mariana mentioned that we are trying to think about developing resources for schools. So occasionally we go out and talk to schools and give presentations. I think some of the other Unique staff who've done this are on this call. And so we have a presentation that we can give to schools about these conditions in general, and if the school have children with particular conditions, we can sort of focus on those a little bit as well. But that's something we'd like to do more of, you know, helping the teachers in both mainstream and specialist school settings understand the impact of having one of these rare conditions. And there's lots of other comments in the chat about that, you know, the collective term. Big challenge with difference of most chromosome disorders is they're invisible, where Downs is visible. And that's another thing about those facial features that some genetic conditions have, but some of them don't have that, and so are not as immediately obvious that your child has a rare condition.
That's a really good point, and that is true, yes.
So we've already run over, so I think I'm going to have to take this moment to thank you